Good afternoon, shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers out there in YouTube land. Today we're working on a 2011, what is this, a Ford Focus or whatever it is. But what we're doing to it, that I'm aware of. Putting the brake line on because the brake pedal went to the floor. And there's the hole. You see it right there between the insulation and that plastic retainer. And it's pretty corroded there. It's obviously an original line because I've never seen where you can buy a line that has this little protective sleeve on there. But where it's located, back here on the bottom of the vehicle, I've got my pit. I got an RV sitting on it with the wheels off of it, so I'm working off the back of my trailer. And of course I got it in park, got the parking brake set, and I've got my winch cable on it, holding it tight so it can't roll backwards. That way I don't have to crawl around under it. I can kind of sit down under it. But the brake line goes to this block here. Actually goes, let me get up here, get my light so you can see. It goes on the right rear. You can see on that block, that's where I took it off from. It's right above the trailing arm. Right, there's a trailing arm right there. Or the axle. But it's really not an axle. But it goes from there and it loops around. And goes to the, oh, there it is. The brake hose right there. That's where it goes. And that flare nut that fastened on right there, it was really tight. So what I did, we just took my dikes and cut the line about 1/8 of an inch away from the end of the line, and left the fitting on there, and then used a socket with a long extension, a swivel ratchet. Went up there and broke that nut loose, and then I was able to use my 1/4 inch socket with a 10mm. There was a 10mm flare nuts. I cut this one off too, equally about 1/8 of an inch away from the flare nut. Used my 6-point sockets. Use a 6-point socket. Don't use a 12-point because they'll probably slip, round off the flare nut, and then you got more troubles. It doesn't have to be that hard, but actually I used my little bolt cutter, wire cutters to cut that line. Then I took my section of line that I had, I just left it whole, and put one of my flare nuts on here with the threads pointed that way, and then I flared this end so that I had that. And then I started bending this line to match the bends in this line. And come up to this end, and you can see we got a 90 degree there, and then it kind of comes over about 1.5 inches, and then it starts to go into another turn. Well, you got to remember, you know, I cut off about 3/4 of an inch of the line So I left it a little bit long, and just as you know, when you put your flare nut on there, time you set it in your bender and put your block on there to hold your line, that's going to be about right perfect. But I'll show you my tricks for bending brake line. You know, I've got one of these tubing benders, and this is great if you've got a kind of a big bend right here where it really doesn't matter. But when you get into tight areas like that, that's not going to fit in there. So what I do is I'll take and put a socket in the vise. I'll put a socket in the vise, and I'm going to use a piece of line that's already bent all to pieces so I don't mess up a good line. And I'll pull on it. Make sure your socket's in there tight, and hold back on this end, hold it towards you, and pull back so you're pulling hard to keep the line from wanting to pull away from the socket and kink. So you get a pretty good round bend, and the tighter your radius here, the smaller the socket you're going to need. Well, you get a brake line that comes off of a master cylinder, and it's got coils in it so that it has give to it. Hang on a minute. I'll use a big socket. That socket is an 1 13/16 inches. But anyway, make sure your socket's in there tight, and let's see if I can put my phone down here where you can see what I'm doing. I can use both hands. There we go. I think you can see that. I'll take my line, make sure your socket's tight, and pull against the socket. Keep your line tight, and just wrap it around that socket and pull it off. See, that line is not kinked at all. And then you can grab between the coils and spread it out, and there you got a line that's got give to it, and it'll have a little give with the flex of the master cylinder. That's why they're coiled like that, because when you push on the pedal, that master cylinder is kind of giving it this. So that line can't be straight, because something's going to happen. It's going to break. So it needs coils in it to give that line flex. But that's how I do that. That doesn't have anything to do with this car, though. Anyway, I take a cutoff wheel or a grinder after I take my socket and take these flare nuts off. I try to reuse these because a lot of them they got different sizes and thread pitches and all of that. So I just, if I can at all possible, I just reuse the flare nut. And besides that, it's cheaper. You know, I just go buy a coil of brake line, and because these fittings, you know, they sell these fittings for like $3 a piece or something, you know, depending on where you get them. And you know, well, they're $6, and you know, you do 10 of these a week. Before you know it, that you know, you've got $60 in fittings that you took good fittings and threw in the trash. So I reuse them, and I'll take and use a grinder or a die grinder or whatever, and polish across the top of that flare nut, and then I'll set the flare nut up here on my flat spot on the vise, and I'll heat it with my torch, get it hot, and spray some knocker loose on there, some squirrel spit or whatever. That's WD-40. It's not really my favorite. I use PB Blaster, but they're not a sponsor. Nobody is. But if you want to send me some money, PM me and I'll give you my address. You can send me some money. But anyway, I'll spray it after I heat it, and then I'll put the nut in the vise gently. I'll squeeze it, and then I'll hit the top with like a 3/16 inch or 1/8 inch punch and drive it down. And then when you take that nut off, you know, make sure it's cooled because you've had the torch on it. Put it on your new line, and you want to spin it. Work it up and down. Make sure that when you get it up underneath the car and you don't have much room, make sure that nut is good and free and ready to go on. And be careful when you're working with it that you don't ding up the threads, and then you got a whole nother problem. But I've got the line bent. It's pretty doggone close to the original, and we'll get it up underneath there and start getting it secured. And you don't fasten both ends tight, or you don't put one end on and tighten it. You just put one on and spin it on a couple of threads, and then work on the other end, and start at the end that's hardest to get to first, and then go to the easiest end, whichever end that is. And you can move the thing around a little bit and kind of work against your bends, because it's not going to be perfect. You got to kind of finagle it and maybe stretch it or shrink it or sharpen your bends to get everything lined up. So let's get it under the car. Okay, I elected to start here on this side toward the center of the vehicle because, well, some of you guys have got refractive vision. In other words, your eyesight will go this way and then it turns that way and then it comes back that way. Well, mine don't. It just goes straight, and then it don't even go straight very good. So I got it up in there, and I just put a wrench on it and turned it about 2 turns, and so that the line is still, so I can still rotate it in the nut, and we'll look and see how we are over on this end, and how close we are to having it lined up on the brake hose. Well, it's pointed right at it. That's a good deal. Well, you can see it's got a little bit of an angle to it, so we'll take and put a wrench on it up here on the hex of the flare nut, so we can grab that, and we'll tweak it a little bit, rotate it toward the right direction. I'm just going to use my line wrench. It's almost like a box end wrench, but we're going to rotate the nut to the top of the direction where, when we bend it down, we're going to go towards the direction that we need to get the right angle. You can kind of see that. I kind of need to drop the phone so I can hold the line. Okay, I set the phone down. I was holding the line right here, holding it back while I was twisting it up that way, and you can see, by golly, we're real close now. We just kind of need to tweak it up on this end just a little bit. I think that's going to work. That's going to work. So let's see if we can. My hand goes up there right between where I'm working and my eyesight. Hang on. Okay, got that one tight. And fellas, don't use your vice grips or your channel locks or your 12-point wrenches. Use a good line wrench. And you be sure and get that dude tight without it slipping on you. You strip it out, and then you got another mess. We got this one tight too. Now let's see. Well, can't get back here, but anyway, I got it tight. So what we're going to do, we'll go up there and take the cap off the master cylinder reservoir and fill the cap up, or not fill the cap up, but fill the reservoir up. Excuse me, I'm getting myself over here. Well, where I can't see it. Trying to show you where I know where it's at, but trying to show you. Okay, you can see the line. There's a line where it goes into the wheel cylinder. That little rubber cap right there is the bleeder screw. It's not a grease zerk. I've seen people try to grease them. I popped it off. So it should take an 8 millimeter or a 15/16. Fellas, use your 6-point socket on that. Don't use a 12-point. Get it all dinked up. The next guy that tries to bleed it can't get it off. But we'll get a socket on there and get that loosened up. Let it start gravity bleeding. Now I got the master cylinder reservoir is full, and I put my 6-point 5/16 socket. Well, it's a 5/16 socket on there, deep well, on my 1/4-inch ratchet. It's open. I'm just letting it gravity bleed. Now, just because the fluid is leaking there, don't mean that all the air is out of it, because that line that we just put on is full of air. So we're going to let that gravity bleed, and but you got to make sure that your reservoir is full. And the reservoir is full. I filled it clear to the top. While that's gravity bleeding, I might show you guys that don't know, be the do-it-yourselfers, how to flare a brake line. And I've got this master cool flaring set that I've had for several years now, and you can see it looks kind of crappy. Well, that's because any brake fluid that's on it, if you don't get it wiped off, well, this thing is probably 15 years old, so it's getting pretty ragged. But I really like it, other than the fact that the hydraulic press is so big. Well, when you're using it underneath the vehicle, maybe in a tight spot, you know, if you're just going to trim off a piece of the line and put it back together, but that's a lot of tool to try to fit. You know, I mean, there's my hand, so you can see it's almost 4.5 hands wide. It's a lot of tool to try to fit up underneath a vehicle. Anyway, we select the size that our line is, and we just happen to be, I've got a piece of 1/4 inch right here handy, so I got that's 1/4 inch 45-degree flare, and so we'll put it in there, and you see the base of it, and there it's kind of got a recess. We'll put the base with the splits going up and down, and there's a good piece of 1/4 inch line. We'll stick that in there, you know, like that, and you want to push it to where your line is just right flush with the end. Set it down in here, and kind of hard to do it with one hand. Get it shoved back up in there where it's supposed to be. And tighten this up. And this gets a lot of brake fluid on it while I'm working with it, especially under a vehicle. So I have to keep this oiled regular, or them threads get galled up and becomes a problem. But tighten that down pretty tight. And then you select your your 1/4 inch. That's the 1/4 inch. You really can't see it, but you set that in there so that the point is lined up with the end of the tubing. And you can turn this, you see it's got threads, so you're screwing this whole thing inward or outward, and get it up close. And let's see, rotate that around, close the valve, and start cranking. We're going to watch this, and as soon as that starts to make sure it's going to go inside the tubing. Okay, it's going in. And you can see you can do it one-handed. So it's going in. Make sure your blocks are flush or up against the press arbor, and work that. And if it's not going in, tighten your valve. This is just like a jack. This is just a hydraulic ram, and it's all the way in. So then loosen it, let it retract, and sometimes it'll stick, and you need to use the appropriate tool to knock it down. Yeah, use the appropriate tool. We're going to back it out just a little bit. One turn, and you can stick your finger underneath it, push the piece out, and you're done with that. And then where you're at with that now is, hang on a minute. Some vehicles use just a single flare, so that's going to be like a bubble. It's going to be flared on one side like this, and on the other side it'll be like that. But I don't have any pieces over here that's got just a single flare, but that's a double flare. You see, it's only cupped on this side right here. That's a double flare. If it was single flare, then that same side would be over there too, except the line would be cut off right there. I don't want to take it out. Well, heck with it. Yeah, I'm going to take it out, but I'm going to show you how you make the double flare. You take your cone and set it in there, and same thing, just pump this in there, pump it in there, and line that up where it's going to go inside of that cone. There it goes. So it's right inside there, and crank it down till it stops. When you get done, you'll have a double flare. Yeah, see, the one on the right is a double flare, and the one on the left is a single flare. That's the one we just flared, but I didn't push it in with the cone to make it a double flare. I just left it a single. So if I set it it would push in on there like that. If it was still in the fixture, in the press, it would press it and push down. See how that is? It mashes it flat. So when you take a line off of a vehicle, you need to look at the end and see, do you have a double flare or a single flare? And then some lines are metric. You know, you got to check, make sure you got the right line size that you're using. This has got metric line size. It's the same type of doodad, but it's just for metric line. It's got 4 3/4, 6, 8, and 10 millimeter. I've never used these. Anyway, we've got 3/16 quarter, 5/16, 3/8, 1/2 inch. I've used this for fuel line. was that, oh, this is 5/16 and 3/8. This is for, I guess this is for fuel line here. Use a different, these are for formulating ends on GM fuel lines when they've got a shoulder on them. So if you got a quick release. But anyhow, that's how you use these. And these are for the, I don't know. But anyway, those are for the brake lines, and I've showed you how to use this tool. Let's go up here and check our brake fluid. Good deal. It's getting pretty low. That means it's going to flush out almost all the fluid that was in that reservoir. So it's going to be all new. I'm going to let it run a while and let it purge all that old fluid out of there. I do have a power bleeder, but I'm showing the DIY guy, the do-it-yourselfer, how to gravity bleed. Now you can see that fluid dripping out of there. It's good and clean, so we know that we've got good fluid all the way back through here. And we'll let that drip a little bit longer, and then we'll close that bleeder valve and push on the brake pedal. Sometimes you get like a scum out of the master cylinder reservoir when the fluid level goes down, and you'll get that scum will go down into the master cylinder bore, and sometimes it messes with your pistons, and you don't get a good pedal, so you got to fart around with it to get it to purge through and get a good seal on your master cylinder. It doesn't mean you always have to put a new master cylinder on it, but I have had to go that route before because I couldn't get it out. But usually with a pressure bleed or a power flush, you can get it cleared out. But anyway, we'll let this bleed a couple more minutes, and then we'll close that off and push on our pedal and see how it goes. But we should have a good pedal now. And but the other brake lines, you know, they're probably equally as bad. I'd like to, you know, heck, I don't know. There's one for the left wheel, and then there's two going from the front to the back because it's ABS, and then you got lines going from the master cylinder to the ABS, and from the ABS to the front wheels. There's a bunch of lines on here to replace. There's a spider right there. He's got him a happy home there. We'll leave him be. But anyway, you know, their sway bar link rods are broke and all that, but somebody's done her the right thing and just wired that up. But the car ain't in real great shape, but she's an elderly lady, and you know, the dadgum control arm bushings are shot, but you know, she probably ain't going to be driving much more anyway. She only drives about 35 miles an hour. The car ain't worth putting a lot of money in, but we'll make it safe for her anyway. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Share, like, and subscribe. Comment if you will.